Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another interview from our summit. Today, we are talking to Leon Morales, and he is from DNA Behavior. Now, what he does is he helps you really assess who people are, and he does it through a very specific and really in-depth process of figuring out that person. So, I'm going to let him talk about it because he knows more about it. But so Leon, tell us who you are and what you do and what DNA behavior is, and what you guys are doing over there.
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure to be part of sort of the summit, and I'm very excited that you invited us to be part of it. And we'll make sure that we invite all of our clients as well to be part of this. I think what you're doing is pretty exciting, and through the post COVID, for those that are really looking how to actually help their team members with recruiting and hiring, that's a big sort of to do right now. And I think one of the things that we do at DNA Behavior really well is even if you have people that work on your team, one of the things that's really important is you need to manage sort of individuals with what their natural talents are. That's what we'll talk about. But my name is Leon Morales. I actually am the president and managing director here at DNA Behavior. And I've been with the company since 2011. And I joined the company because I have a huge interest in human behavior. That's one of the things that really attracted me to come to this company. And I was trained in another behavioral science assessment tool earlier in my career. But to back how I actually got into the work is I actually was in the Air Force, and I graduated, or I ended my career in the Air Force and chose a career in accounting. And if you looked at my DNA behavior profile, I am a huge risk taker, and I'm also very spontaneous. Two things that probably really do not make great accountants. So I spent 17 years what I call going against the grain. And that's why I really am excited about working at DNA Behavior, because a lot of times people get into careers that they're not necessarily suited for, either through family sort of connections or they just had an interest in it, but they're not naturally wired to do that. And I think one of the things that always makes me excited is when I see people go through our process and have this light bulb moment around their identity, around, wow, this is really what I'm naturally gifted at doing. That's what really inspires me to do the work that we do.
Awesome. And I think that people underestimate the value of understanding someone even on that level, and how it applies to your business. And I think that's the first thing I want to kind of talk about. So, we need to figure out how people operate. So I want you to tell us about, what are some ways that knowing how someone operates can benefit a business, but then also how do we figure that out? So there's two things, if that makes sense.
So that's a great question. And one thing, Bill, that most people don't know is exactly how they're wired. They probably have some idea of their talents, but they may not really understand it. Like I didn't really realize how, even though I've been through other assessments, personality assessments, I didn't realize what a huge risk taker I am. And I also didn't realize, I knew generally that I was pretty spontaneous, but I didn't know that it was a gift. I thought it was, oh, I don't seem to be able to pull a project plan together as easily as somebody else. That's what the enlightening part of it was. And that's really what probably most people, when they go through this, understand what we call natural and instinctive behavior. And the science behind it is when somebody completes the questionnaire, which takes about 10 minutes, they get these talents or these traits that they get identified, and they see it and they're like, wow, that really is interesting. But what makes it really magical is when it's compared to another team member on their team. And it literally is like, oh my gosh, it's like this comparative analysis that, it's all of a sudden, wow, I just thought you were being obstinate on certain things. That's how you are wired. And it's sort of those light bulb moments. And one of the things I love to do is when we work with teams, going into a team, and let's say it's an executive team of 10 people, and seeing how that team is wired naturally. And before I've ever met any of the team members, I can actually tell the CEO or the COO, here's where your team has challenges without even interviewing anyone. It's really in that natural and instinctive behavior. And I wanted to just talk about natural behavior for just 1 second. So We all have two levels of behavior, and the science behind it, if anybody studied Daniel Kahneman's work on thinking fast and slow, that every human being has two levels of behavior. Level one behavior is programmed, sort of wired by the time we're 3 years old. So it's very hardwired. Level two behaviors are the things that we learn post three into our adulthood. We continuously learn. That's why people can grow. And one of the challenges a lot of the assessment personality companies have is they have a situational bias. So if you take the assessment today, in 5 years, it might change. And that's true. With the DNA insights, it does not change. You can sort of bank on this is how I'm wired, whether I'm 17 or 80. It's how I'm naturally wired. And that's what makes us uniquely positioned in the marketplace in on the business side, but also financial. We actually, with that same exact questionnaire, we can see somebody's financial behavior and really help them understand what that is in their investing strategies. So that's what makes us quite unique in the market.
Absolutely. And understanding how your team operates with each other and how they're going to operate with consumers or who you're selling to is really what we can start figuring out from these assessments. And the power behind that is when you start onboarding new people, adding people to your team, or even are having an issue with your team and you're trying to figure out what's the problem. And by doing this and having this, in humanity, understanding is everything. It helps us get over bias. It helps us get through challenges or operational hazards. And so by having this understanding and this in-depth look at how people are operating with each other, we're now able to really build a team that's going to stay and continue to operate at the level we want them to. So the next thing I kind of want to touch on is that concept of using it as a tool in team building, hiring process. Like where does it come in, and how can we apply it for its maximum effect?
Yep, great question. And one thing that really makes it unique is when you mentioned onboarding, because I will say that um, in that research that 80% of business issues are typically communication related. And it really does speak to that you need different types of personalities in an organization, but many times they just don't understand each other. And it can be the thing, especially in onboarding with a new team member, that this person has such strength. Let's say that they're very planned and creative. Let's say that those are the two traits that that person has. So when they're onboarding, the people that they work with might see them, that they're obstinate or they're just too they're not structured enough in the creative side, or they're not sort of explaining the plan. And it can really create some natural tension within the team. And many times we've always said that if a new team member comes in, they're probably going to either sort of be there for 30, 60, or 90 days. That's sort of that pivotal point. With using sort of the comparison information that I mentioned earlier, you could really short circuit that and really have much more optimization with two people working together, or even a team that really optimizes that person's strength in the team. So it's like, okay, we've got this special project. Let's bring this person because they really do have those natural strengths to be able to take the project to where we need it to go. It can be very precise in that.
Absolutely. And I think that we also need to recognize that it's an immense time and money saver, because by understanding these people from the beginning, or people that you're looking to hire, the retention is going to be stronger, and you're not going to have as much overturn, and you're going to be able to avoid rehiring people, which is an immense cost, and also um, the loss that you would have of hiring someone and then having to fire them and find someone new, and now that job is not being fulfilled. So it's an immense time saver, and that as well as with also being a good thing to help you see who you want to hire. So, for example, if you have a sales guy who's doing really, really good, and then you have him take the test, now when you hire new people, you can look for that same kind of personality. And it again becomes an amazing tool for that. So, kind of moving from there, what I'd like to talk about is with what are some of the results we're getting back? What are some of the questions that are in the, like style of question that is in the thing, and what can someone expect when going through it, if you will?
Yeah, great question. So that's one thing I did mention. It takes about 10 minutes to complete it. And it's called a forced choice assessment model. And what that means is that there's simple phrases, and it's at about a fourth grade education to understand the question, what it's asking. It's asking it's giving you three simple words, and you have to agree. I like most, and I like least. So, and then you have to leave one on the table, and then you move to the next question. So probably the number one sort of issue is people say, gosh, it was really kind of tough because there were a couple of questions that I saw myself in all three. And so, but you have to choose, and that sort of gets you to the next point. But that's what gets down to that natural and instinctive behavior. It sort of creates that pressure point. That's where you're going to get the most results. And that's how that's the validation around using it for financial planning. So it really is, the accuracy around that is precise. And when somebody does go through that, and I've had this happen before, Bill, where somebody would say, this just doesn't look like me. And we always say, show your spouse or somebody so in your life that you know really well. And every single time they're like, that's exactly who you are. But that can be a blind spot for that person. They may not see themselves like that. That can be, one of the aha moments for a person is like, okay, I really am wired like this. Now I need to figure out what those strengths are to be able to utilize it in the right way to be part of a team. Because we see that when people are matched in a role that they're naturally gifted at doing, they'll be able to perform consistently above. When you talk about that salesperson, if you have that salesperson that has that right sort of behavioral profile, they will thrive in the role. And if you use some of the techniques in the hiring report that shows what that person really motivates that person will stay with you, long term. They're not going to be looking for other jobs because it's rarely about a salary that people leave another company. They leave their company. And there was a book called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, written in the late 1990s. People don't leave companies, they leave their manager. And I'm a big believer of that. If you really manage your team and manage sort of the work that they do based on their behavioral sort of need, they will stay with you. It's not, if somebody's really money motivated, that's a tough one to keep them. You shouldn't just reward people by giving them more money because they're going to another company. But if you're giving them the right things, and it's rarely about money, it's about opportunity, or it's about travel, or it's whatever that is that motivates that person. Every person's going to be unique. You will have somebody that'll stay with your team.
Absolutely. And that's important. And I like how you break it out of how the test would break it away from their mind getting in the way.
Yeah.
The more time someone has to think about it, the harder it is. And I think that's what we're really talking about here, which is that instinctual, that core of people, because the more you understand that, like you said, the more you can drive them, motivate them correctly, and keep them moving forward. So this is why it's such an immense tool to use.
Yeah. And one thing, just to add on to that last question that you mentioned, the one thing that makes it pretty easy. So when I started in the company, we're big believers that you shouldn't have a behavioral consultant in the company long term, unless that's something you really believe in, like having coaches, which I'm a big believer of coaching because I think that really helps people perform. But one of the things that you don't want, we always talk about, you have an event and you have a team building event and everybody thinks, wow, this is really interesting. And, I kind of see who you are. Then you leave and everybody forgets what the behavior of the individual is like. Now, what were you? And that's what makes the DNA Insights very useful is, there's one page report that's called a performance key report. And it shows the 5 things on there that I really need. And if you give me those things, we will have a great relationship. It's amazing to see. So we have them posted in our office, above our door. So you sort of know, hey, if you're going to talk to Leon, remember don't just edit his ideas prematurely. And that's a need for me. So it really helps individuals perform. But the words on the reports in dashboards are so easy to remember that they're not difficult. They're not in psychology language. It's really around easy, practical language that helps people perform. And you don't have to have that behavior coach in the office. It can be a very self-directed, and we really encourage that, very self-directed with teams to be able to use it, because it's really about, if I know that I'm an initiator, which I am, you can see there in my tagline. So I'm somebody that really does like to move things. I like to kind of act quick, move things. And I don't want a ton of detail because I get really sort of anxious when I see a lot of detail. But there are people on our team, Bill, that love detail and they're great at it, and I appreciate them. And we have a lot of mutual respect for each other. But if I didn't know that about them, I would think that they're either slow or that they, need way more information. And we appreciate that. So if you work with someone just on those 5 environment keys, you can have a great outcome with anybody on your team.
Absolutely. All right, so we've touched on the importance of understanding people when it comes to bring them on to, hire them, onboard them, have them part of the company, how we interact with them, how we move forward with them, and how we motivate them. The next thing I want to kind of talk about is when it comes to leadership positions, and you're looking for someone to lead the others. What are ways that we're going to use this, like use an assessment in general to help them, but also how is that leader person able to use these? And we touched on it a little bit, but let's go a little bit more in depth of how they're going to apply it and how they're going to be able to use this.
Yep. No, I think that's a great question. And one of the things, so when somebody completes that natural behavior, that's good for their lifetime. You don't have to retake it. It's good for sort of that individual. But there's also what we call a learned behavior 360 that we have as part of our tool set. So every 2 years, our team goes through a leadership 360 where everyone on our team that reports to us will rate us based on a score of 1 to 5 and 75 questions through that 360. And it then will give us a result, and they can comment, and it gives us results of how our leadership is on that team. And it's eerie to see it because the 2 things that I talked about, I'm a huge risk taker and I'm very spontaneous. And that's usually the feedback that comes back is like, well, Leon, you may not plan these things. It comes out, but I know it. It's not an excuse. I do know I need to prepare for it. So I have to work with our team. That's why I said I have such appreciation for those reflective thinkers, because they really help me plan the work. And when you use that, when you promote somebody in the next role that they're really fit for, there's sort of a process that you go through. That person's pretty familiar. They've got a lot of emotional intelligence in who they are. So yes, I'm very spontaneous and I'm very much of a risk taker, but I know I need to mitigate those things by other team members that I work with to be able to do that. If I didn't have sort of the DNA insights, I may not know, I might be intuitive about it, but I might not be sort of exact around who do I pull in and who do I sort of rely on for these things. And that's really what I've always believed at the CEO level. You can hire anyone from our 10 unique styles as long as they have a lot of emotional intelligence about who they are in their evolution and in their talent and who, what they bring to the table.
Absolutely. And then I think you touched on a good point where when you're building the team and you're using this tool to help you build that team, by knowing your strengths, you're able to figure out, what do you need to cover? And then also who are the other people on your strengths? And
Exactly.
I think, one other part that would be talked about is, what you're doing as a team. Are you a sales team? Are you a marketing team?
Yeah.
And that's going to help you also figure out, who you need to build. So really it creates this roadmap for you of, what you need to put together in order to really have a success in this. And I think that's what this tool is really good at and what we can accomplish with it. Now,
can I add one other thing, Bill? Because you
yeah,
brought up a great point. I think, one of the things that we do when we get ready to hire a new person, we're very, specific about a job description. And then we know, hey, this is the type of benchmark that we want. And we're a company that we put all of our candidates through the questionnaire, and we sort of our subscription package allows that, because one of the challenges a lot of companies have is they put the 2 top candidates through a questionnaire. They try to figure that out. Well, there could have been somebody maybe in the fourth or fifth choice that was a perfect match, but they wouldn't have known it. So you can literally, create, maybe identifying the wrong candidate because you didn't know that about, you're able to be very precise on what that benchmark is. And the other thing that's really interesting from an EEOC perspective, if you're putting the top two people through that questionnaire, that third or fourth person might have a legitimate, hey, why didn't you select me? When you put everybody through the questionnaire, it's uniformly done. Then you sort of eliminate that you have any EEOC issues. It really is uniformly applied. We applied that this is the type of role that we needed, and these are the people that had those sort of strengths to be able to apply for the job.
Absolutely, and it cuts down and saves on time as well for the people
Totally.
going through the hiring process.
Especially for the recruiters, because they're getting a lot of resumes.
Yeah.
And, trying to sort through those are very challenging.
Absolutely. And now instead of 1,000 people that applied, they can cut it down to 500 and start whittling down the field.
That's right.
Awesome. So to kind of give us some of what we talked about so far, this tool is instrumental in building teams and also hiring people to your company and understanding your personnel in your company to make sure that everyone's working towards the same goal and has the same vision, mission, and drive. And also, using this tool to really succeed in all that is, I think one of the things a lot of business owners don't use because they either aren't familiar with it or they don't particularly have one for their company and they don't realize that they can still get this from other places. They don't necessarily have to be Tony Robbins or, any of that kind of stuff. So, before we kind of get into some actionable steps of what they could, what would be some first things to do when thinking about implementing this in their business, is there anything else that you think we should cover about this kind of tool, how to use it, and why it's beneficial?
I think, we've covered a lot of that, Bill. I think it's, probably the one challenge, and you brought that up at the start of your question, is that people think it might be more challenging to start than it really is. I think because behavioral science can be a bit intimidating. It's like, what do I do? How do I get started? I think one of the things that we've definitely improved on over the time I've been with DNA Behavior is we make it very easy to go to the website, go through a profile yourself, because that's how you really learn about the power of it. And there's reports there that really kind of diagnose who you are. That's great. It's a free trial. And then the next step is we do have right off of the website, you can actually sign up for a package. Literally, there's no obligation. It's a 14-day trial. And if you put your team members through it, like 1 or 2, 3, all of a sudden you start realizing, wow, this is really pretty amazing information. And 75% of our clients never have any formal training from DNA Behavior. They do it all from the website through the self-directed training. It's a very high percentage. And even, the 25% that do need a little bit, we call it build it with you or for you. They learn it pretty quick, because if you put 5 people on your team through the DNA questionnaire, you kind of know this stuff. It's not something that you have to learn or educate yourself around behavioral sciences.
Awesome. All right. So that kind of touches on some of the, first things to do, obviously seeking out where are you getting this from. From a standpoint of any prep work or things that they should have kind of like organized before they start implementing something like this in their company, is there anything that they should think about before they start being like, just pass it around and let everyone take it?
Yeah. One thing, and that's a great question. One thing, and I'm always even that 360 that I mentioned, I'm a big believer of, you don't want to bring in sort of the DNA insights when you've got a lot of trouble on the team. You need to displace people because they're just not the right fit. It could be seen, hey, let's just go and, implement this behavioral sciences sort of solution, and then we'll know we can get rid of that person. That's a real dangerous thing to do. It's never a good idea when there's, you've identified that you've got somebody that really needs to go. I think that's always important to take care of that before you embark on something, because if people see that it's a retaliatory sort of move, that we're going to start using it just to weed people out. That's a real dangerous. That's a dangerous cultural sort of move, and it can backfire on the leaders in the company. You want to do it when it's like, hey, this is one of our initiatives. We really want to help people grow in their career and really understand their strengths. When it's done in that manner, you have 100% participation. People feel really good about it and learn about it. And it can be quite fun to be able to sort of, okay, you're an initiator, you're a facilitator. We are complete opposites, but we need to work together. Those are the types of conversations that happen. And we have this great guide. It's called the Unlocking Guide. And I have seen more teams go through the questionnaire, go through it, use the Unlocking Guide without even having a consultant on working with them, because the information's pretty prescriptive and really understanding strengths. We're a very strengths-based company. We don't really focus on what we call struggles. If a strength overplayed can become a struggle. If I try to be too planned in my work, Bill, I usually don't succeed because I just am not a huge planner. I can put the highlights together, but if I had to do that every day as a project manager, I probably would be unsuccessful and probably would end up losing my job because it's just not a natural talent for me. So that's what we really try to help people understand, is use it with a team that's really ready for this and prepare them for it. There's not a lot of preparing, but people use it as identifying these are unique identity talents, and that usually is a key winner.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. So that's a lot to unpack for everybody, but I think they all understand that, doing an assessment like this is very integral to making things successful. So with that in mind, I think we'll wrap up this interview. Thanks so much, Leon, for, talking to us about this and really showing us the importance of this tool and why we need to use it. And, we will see everybody in the networking event tonight. And, let's all make connections. And thank you so much for listening to the video, guys.